Hey people, this is my review of X-Men First Class and the second of the superhero movie battle of 2011. For those of you who don't know, I am comparing Thor, X-Men First Class, Green Lantern, and Captain America to see which superhero movie comes out on top for the year. So, for a while I really thought of X-Men First Class as the underdog of this competition, but I'm pleased to say that it really surprised me and it might actually turn out to be the movie to beat. A while back I was very skeptical of this movie. I'm not one of those people who just likes to hate on Fox in the way they do the X-Men movies. I kind of accept the changes that they made in the past X-Men movies for the most part, and to me they've really proven that they can do a good X-Men movie. But over the course of the development of this movie, there were a lot of things that really kind of indicated that it really might not be very good. Like, for instance, the first pictures that were leaked from the movie looked really bad. Like, really cheesily put together, and some of the posters that they came out with early on looked pretty bad too. But let's start off at the beginning. A few years ago we learned that they were going to be doing prequels to the X-Men movies, including Wolverine and Magneto. Wolverine was made, but Magneto got derailed. Eventually they decided to incorporate elements from the plot of Magneto into X-Men First Class. So we accepted that we were getting the origins of Xavier and Magneto tied into the founding of the X-Men. Then details came and fans started to learn that there were going to be pretty major contradictions to both the story of the comic books and the established continuity of the movies. So there was kind of an uproar among the fans. First, like, the major comic contradiction that got a lot of people ticked off was the lineup of the first class of X-Men. X-Men fans know that the original 5 X-Men were Cyclops, Jean, Beast, Angel, and Iceman. Of those, Beast is the only one featured in this movie, so there were a lot of people that were really annoyed by that. And Cyclops' younger brother is featured in X-Men First Class, which takes place before Cyclops would have been born, I believe. So that's another thing that got people irritated. But what gets to me is that a lot of people who are the most vocal in their complaints about how it contradicts the comic books are also very vocal about how it contradicts the earlier movies. But if you think about it, you really have to choose one to complain about, because the lineup of the First Class could not possibly be the same as the original comics, because in the first X-Men movie, Iceman is introduced as a teenager, so he couldn't be born at the same point and go to school with Cyclops and Jean and them. And Angel was introduced in the third movie, and he met the X-Men for the first time there. So neither Iceman or Angel could possibly be among the first class if you're sticking to the movie continuity. So you kind of have to choose. Are you going to complain about movie continuity, or are you going to complain about loyalty to comics? But people just like to complain a lot. Anyway, there were a few contradictions to the movie continuity that people thought were pretty major. First, Emma Frost was featured in Wolverine as a teenager. This takes place later than X-Men First Class, but in First Class, Emma Frost is featured as an adult. Now, she was never mentioned by name in Wolverine, so this isn't technically a flaw. Like, it could just be another mutant who looks similar and has similar powers, but it was very heavily implied that this was Emma Frost. Second, Beast is shown to transform into his blue form over the course of First Class. Beast made a cameo in X-Men 2, and he was still pre-blue form. He was very human looking. And finally, the most major contradiction that I've found is that in X-Men 3, there is a scene at the very beginning of the movie that takes place 20 years before the events of X-Men 3. So, since the movie came out in 2006, let's say this is 1986, Professor Xavier and Magneto go to visit Jean Grey. And at this point, they're still working together. Professor Xavier is not in the wheelchair yet, and he's bald. So this kind of contradicts First Class, because as you probably know, First Class tells the story of Xavier and Magneto's meeting and kind of how their friendship falls apart over the course of the movie, which takes place mostly in 1962. So this is a very big kind of contradiction there between the events of X-Men 3, what's established in their past, and what goes on in First Class. But I decided to kind of just put all that away and just watch this as a standalone movie and judge it based on that, because I think that's the most fair way to judge a movie like this. I guess I'll start off with Xavier and Magneto, since they were pretty much the focus of the movie. First things first, both James McAvoy and Michael Fassbender did great jobs in their roles. They really had a lot to live up to, because both Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen gave great performances in the first 3 movies. But McAvoy and Fassbender were really able to make the roles their own, while still being believable as younger versions of these characters that we were already familiar with. I really like the way that they met in the movie, but I don't want to kind of spoil that for anybody who hasn't seen it, so I might talk about that later in the mild spoiler section, but for now I'll just leave it at that. The overall story of the movie was pretty good, and it kept me interested the whole time. I thought the decision to have the Cold War and the Cuban Missile Crisis play such a prominent role in the movie really paid off and helped to make their world feel real and relatable. I thought the action was pretty good, and actually better than I was expecting for this movie. It doesn't take itself too seriously, but it's definitely darker and a bit more serious than movies like Iron Man or Thor. I really kind of want to get into my mild spoiler section now so I can go more in depth with my review. So to wrap it up, for those of you who don't want to be spoiled, X-Men First Class gets an A from me, and go check it out and come back and watch the rest of this video. One of the things I really enjoyed about the movie was the way they told the story of Magneto. I thought it was very cool that they decided to reshoot the first scene from the original X-Men movie and continue that story. I thought one of the most brilliant things about how they told the story was the helmet and all that it symbolized, if you really think about it. Sebastian Shaw was the person responsible for making Magneto who he is, but he also kind of symbolized and foreshadowed what he would become. Their ideas were very similar, and the way that Magneto at the end of the movie assumes control of Shaw's former group kind of solidifies the similarity between the two. I thought the helmet was a very great tool to kind of highlight this similarity between the two, because it's very much the symbol and iconic image of Magneto. So when Shaw first pulls out the helmet and puts it on, we're instantly reminded of Magneto, and we associate Shaw with Magneto since he has the helmet. When Eric goes to confront Shaw at the climax of the movie, Shaw still has the helmet, so he's the one with the power and control over the situation. When Eric manages to take the helmet from him, the power shifts and he gains control of the situation. Another thing that the helmet represents is it is the thing that keeps telepaths from reading their minds. So when Charles was able to get into Eric's mind, he was able to communicate with him, and he was able to feel his emotions, and it really brought them closer together as friends. When he puts on the helmet, he's completely blocking Charles. So it kind of symbolizes his turning his back to Charles's friendship and Charles's beliefs to kind of go his own way. I gotta say that I loved the 2 cameos of the movie. I thought Hugh Jackman's cameo was hilarious and kind of the perfect way to include Wolverine in the story, because it felt very fitting with the character, how he would react to the situation. Rebecca Romijn's cameo was also very fitting, and it was a clever way to kind of fit her into the movie. One of the flaws I observed in First Class, I think, was the underdevelopment of Professor Xavier's relationship with Moira McTaggart. You just didn't really see them fall for each other or really interact that much over the course of the movie. Like, she was there, but you didn't really get a sense of much closeness between them. So at the end of the movie, when they kind of part ways, it wasn't really that sad to see them have to leave each other. I think there might have been scenes that they shot that were cut for this, and maybe they intend on revisiting that in future films, but I think if they were possibly able to include more scenes in the middle of them like becoming close and getting to know each other better, you'd feel sorrier for Xavier that he has this memory of this person who doesn't remember him, and he has to just say goodbye to her. Also, while Xavier and Magneto's relationship was done well, I felt that in a way it was kind of rushed. I've always gotten the sense that Xavier and Magneto knew each other for many years and their friendship lasted a long time before they kind of fell apart and found themselves on opposing sides. This makes me feel very conflicted about First Class because I felt that choosing to tell the story of how they meet and how they eventually separate made First Class very strong. However, I don't think they were fully able to accomplish making them into very close friends over the course of First Class when they only knew each other for a few months at the most. So, when you look at something like the Star Wars prequel trilogy, Obi-Wan and Anakin's story was told over 3 movies. Regardless of how you feel about the quality of those movies, by the time we get to the 3rd movie, it's convincing that Obi-Wan and Anakin have become very close simply because of all the time that you know they have spent together, from this kid just being a little boy to growing up just with this man as his only guide and mentor. So when you see them as enemies, you know that it's been a very long journey together, and this separation is a very big thing. Whereas with Xavier and Magneto in this movie, they met and they became friends, but the friendship didn't get a chance to really go anywhere before they separated. I've heard that they intend X-Men First Class to be the start of a new series of X-Men movies. While I loved everything about Xavier and Magneto's final scene together in this movie, I think ideally I would have postponed that kind of moment for the end of the 3rd movie in the trilogy, possible trilogy. This way you could have taken the time to develop the relationship and show it evolve more over many years, and it would line up better with the 1986 visit to Jean Grey's house when they're still friends. This would also give the series more direction and momentum as you move towards the falling apart, instead of having them fall apart at the beginning and not really having that much that you need to accomplish in the next 2 movies, besides introducing a few of the X-Men that we know at the beginning of the first X-Men movie. If we're looking to X-Men Origins Wolverine to give us an idea of the order of events, we know that Scott Summers as a teenager meets a wheelchair-bound Professor Xavier at the end of that movie. So that means that sometime between Xavier and Magneto going to visit Jean Grey and Xavier meeting Scott Summers, the incident with Magneto and Professor Xavier's paralysis happens. Since trying to fit in with the established continuity of the previous X-Men movies complicates things so much, it might have been a better idea to not really try to associate itself with those movies so much, and really make this new series completely its own story. That would give them more freedom to really introduce characters whenever they wanted to, and have the events unfold however they saw fit. One last thing I would have changed a little bit was the final scene of the movie. I think it would have been better if this was the only time of the course of the movie that we heard the word Magneto. I would have taken out Mystique's suggestion of the name, so when Magneto goes to Emma Frost, he just says, "Call me Magneto." And these words would be a lot more significant to us because it's the first time we're hearing this, and it would really mark the transition in his identity from Eric to Magneto, ending the movie on a stronger note. To sum up my thoughts, X-Men First Class is a very good movie, but it leaves me a little bit concerned for the future of the series because I'm worried that they might have sacrificed a really great multi-movie story for the sake of creating a great standalone movie. So, if you liked what you saw, please subscribe and tune in next time.